Imagine it's 2 a.m. You are standing in your kitchen, the cold linoleum tiles pressing against your bare feet. The only light comes from the hum of the refrigerator, and across from you, the person you love most in the world is screaming. Or perhaps it's worse. Perhaps they are looking at you with that icy, silent contempt that feels like a physical weight in the room. Your heart is hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird in a cage. You feel a familiar toxic heat rising in your neck. Your mouth is dry, but your mind is flooded with a surge of words. Vicious, sharp, perfect words. These aren't just retorts. They are precision-guided missiles designed to cut through their defenses and bring them to their knees. You are exactly 1 second away from saying something that you can never take back, something that will fundamentally alter the human hardware of your relationship forever. In that moment, you aren't in control. You feel like a helpless passenger in the back seat of your own body, watching through the window as someone else takes the wheel and prepares to drive the car off a cliff. Now keep that image in your mind. Feel the vibration of that anger. Hold that tension. Because before I tell you how that night ends, we need to talk about the passenger. We need to talk about why you weren't actually the one standing in that kitchen. The internal diagnostic. Enter Carl Jung. Welcome back to the lab. If you're new here, I'm the mind mechanic. We don't do self-help fluff or think positive platitudes. We do high-performance calibration for the human experience. We treat your psyche like a high-performance engine. When it's smoking, we don't pray for it to stop. We open the hood and find the leak. Most conflict resolution advice is a joke. They tell you to take a deep breath or count to 10. That is like trying to put out a forest fire with a water pistol. It doesn't work because it doesn't address the fuel. To fix the friction, you have to understand the pressure. And to understand the pressure, we have to look at the work of the grandfather of psychological engineering, Carl Jung. Jung proposed a concept that is essential for any mind mechanic to master. He called it the shadow. Think of your personality as a house. To stay safe, to be likable, and to fit into society, you created a well-lit living room where you invite guests. But there is also a basement. Every time you were told as a child that your anger was bad, or your ambition was greedy, or your sensitivity was weak, you didn't actually delete those traits. You just moved them to the basement. The shadow is the storage locker of your psyche. It's where you keep everything about yourself that you find unacceptable. But here is the mechanical reality. The basement isn't airtight. When pressure builds up in the living room, when you are tired, stressed, or challenged, the shadow leaks. And when it leaks, it doesn't just come out as you. It comes out through a process called projection. The neurology of the shadow. Before we go further, let's look at the wiring. When your shadow is triggered, your prefrontal cortex, the logical, mechanic part of your brain, effectively loses power. The amygdala takes over the electrical grid. This is the neurology-physiology connection. Your body doesn't know the difference between a verbal insult and a saber-toothed tiger. It prepares for a survival event. Your pupils dilate, your blood shunts away from your digestive system and into your muscles, and your empathy circuits are manually overridden. You are no longer a modern human. You are a biological weapon. This is why you say things in a fight that make you cringe the next morning. It wasn't you speaking, it was your survival hardware trying to neutralize a perceived threat. The second loop, Mark and the mirror. Let me tell you about a client I'll call Mark. Mark was a brilliant senior systems architect, high IQ, incredible technical hardware, but he had a massive ongoing conflict with his department head, Sarah. He told me, "She's arrogant, she's loud, she takes up all the oxygen in the room and never listens to anyone else's expertise." Mark's hatred for Sarah was visceral. It was red line intensity. Every time she walked into a meeting, Mark's jaw would lock. He spent his nights ruminating on her flaws, building a mental file of every arrogant thing she ever said. He was ready to quit a high-paying career just to get away from her energy. I sat Mark down and asked him one question. When was the last time you allowed yourself to be the most arrogant person in the room? Mark looked at me like I had just insulted his mother. "Never," he said. "I was raised to be humble. My father was a blue-collar guy who hated big shots. I make sure I am always the quietest, most humble guy in the room. I hate people who show off." There was the leak. The very traits Mark hated in Sarah, were the exact traits he had imprisoned in his own basement. Because Mark wasn't allowed to be big or loud or confident, seeing Sarah do it felt like a personal attack on his worldview. He wasn't actually fighting Sarah. He was fighting the parts of himself he had suppressed for 30 years. Sarah wasn't a villain, she was a mirror. The Calibration 7 Tools for System Restoration. To become a master of conflict, we have to stop trying to win the fight and start managing the hardware. 1. The shadow diagnostic, the wait, that's me, check. The next time someone's behavior makes you irrationally angry, not just annoyed but triggered, stop. This is a sensor reading. Ask yourself, what about this person am I not allowed to be? If you hate their laziness, perhaps you are a repressed workaholic who desperately needs a break. If you hate their aggression, perhaps you've suppressed your own healthy power. Recognizing the shadow is 50% of the de-escalation. When the shadow takes the wheel, you are physically intoxicated by adrenaline and cortisol. Scientific data shows that it takes roughly 90 seconds for those chemicals to flush out of your bloodstream, provided you don't keep the engine revving with angry internal dialogue. When you feel that heat in your neck, give yourself a system pause. Silence isn't weakness, it's a cooling cycle. Jung's goal wasn't for us to kill our shadow. An engine without fire doesn't move. He wanted us to integrate it. In a conflict, instead of letting your anger explode, invite the shadow to the table. Use that raw energy to set a firm, calm boundary. Use the shadow's strength to say no without the shadow's rage. This is how you become unshakable. Every recurring conflict is a mirror. If you find yourself having the same argument with your boss, then your spouse, then the guy who cut you off in traffic, the problem isn't them. The common denominator is your hardware. You are projecting the same internal locker onto different screens. Stop trying to fix the screens, fix the projector. Conflict is rarely one-sided. The person you are fighting has a basement full of repressed traits too. They aren't evil, they are also being driven by parts of themselves they don't understand. When you realize you are just two glitching systems bumping into each other, the empathy becomes a cooling agent. It's hard to stay furious when you realize the other person is also a passenger in their own body. Jung called the process of becoming your whole self individuation. Conflict is actually a gift. It's a check engine light. It shows you exactly where your internal locker is leaking. Every argument is a map to a part of yourself you haven't healed yet. Don't waste the crisis. Use it for data. This is the ultimate mind mechanic move. Instead of you versus me, you pivot the perspective. Say, it feels like there is a dynamic happening between us right now that is making us both miserable. How can we look at this dynamic together? You are no longer combatants. You are co-mechanics looking at a broken engine on a bench. So what happened in that kitchen? I felt that Shadow wanted to scream. I had the perfect insult ready to launch. But then I felt the linoleum on my feet. I remembered the lab. I realized I wasn't actually mad at her. I was mad because I felt powerless, a feeling I had locked in my basement since I was a kid. I took a breath. I didn't yell, I didn't cut her down. I simply said, I'm feeling a lot of internal heat right now, and I think I'm reacting to something from my past that isn't about you. Can we talk about this in the morning when my system is cooled down? The tension didn't just fade, it evaporated. The predator in the room vanished because I acknowledged it. By owning my shadow, I took the fuel out of the fire. Summary of the calibration conflict isn't a failure of character. It's a failure of calibration. We've looked at the shadow and the mechanics of projection. We learned the 90-second flush and the power of integration. We did the mirror audit and embraced the path of individuation. And finally, we used the third-party pivot to change the game. You don't need to be perfect to be a mind mechanic. You just need to be willing to look into the dark corners of your own basement, because that's where the power is hidden. I'll see you in the next session. Let's get your engine running right.